Also, get everyone off to the side. Gives me some offside.
You will lose service.
No, I like it. That way when I talk, I can just stand on you. That should be more efficient. Okay. We're gonna do a quick little min cup on page 289. 289 in the red books right here, they're in the front shelf. I'm sure that will you first set up there. Ja, never, York was starting to go, but nothing like yeah, hallelujah. Perfect amount of people, please rise to your equal page 290. Yeah, Shemira, God, Allah, you talk to say, I'm the one to say, but I want to put a prayer for Israel, I'm not going to be rude. Amen. If you share up, we're up with some of the Almighty. You're up, be sure up, be far, is the Savior, very glad to love, maybe to share. And I'm going to talk share that, you come out and come out, and I'm going to the first three brachos of the Amida out loud. And then you'll have time to do the Amida by yourself afterwards. 291. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, El Hagedol, Hagibor HaNorah, El Elyon, Golach Tzim, Koviv, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zofer Chasdei Yaakov, V'Levi Goal, V'Bnei Bneihem, V'Man Shmo V'Ahava, Melech Hazer Moshiach Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham. Atagi Borlonai, Mechayim Atah Rav Hoshea, Murikatao, Mechalkel Panim, Chesed, Mechayim Rachamim Rabim, so Mechalti, Rofel Kalim, Matira Suri, Mechayim Manato Shenelpa, Mikahal Graf, Midamela, Mechayim, Mechayim Matiak Shua, Manatala, Payokmeti, Marokata, Nine, Mechayim Amexi. In this Chicago, Chemshmak Shimoto Bishara. We have the apple of cards at old Zebim, nice all the cards go to Matam broke the mirror, broke for a 90 combo, great Chicago to the north. Another time, I skipped the Robador Alfian. Robador Gito, la Howlett, and a team to Chicago Fish, Chicago, the review loyal, the Lava, Kiowa, Calcata, Arokata, Nine, Adela Cado. The Amida continues until page 290. 300. Però i crash ma anche se io non quello che poi sarà parlato con previous room e each may route for out for the mail però mi ci va a fare i comandi da sempre fare le cose che tu c'è le anni come questa scelta però da me come tanto rambe la room però sono tanto poi sono di fare room in che sono in lingo poi sono di room se sono di session Israel Real what? It's 302 Corner Scottish. Eat the Dow, eat the Dutch, and the Rubber. Now, to grab your credit beyond the say, Kaye phone, the only phone, Kaye, the salvation shred. The loud piece on Kaye fever, in H. May Robin, Garas, the long man. Ikara, Bishaba, Isahar, Bisawan, Bisase. Bisa dar, bisa live, bisa love, make for the child, very good. An Aegon, Nicole, your Pata, the Shiro Top, Tushakata, Nemata, Gamiran, now love, the A. In A, Shama, Rabba, the Shmaya, Array, down for Israel, A. Say Shalom, Yirah, Uya, say Shalom, A. Down for Israel, Amen. Be seated, we'll go all the way back to page 11 for the start of our lecture. Page 11. Leave up to the door, no more toilet open, the hand will do that. I should be talking out the moon, and the new coffee. 13. She will love the one, she never thought of, she will love the one, she will love the one, I certainly hope now, yes, you are some stop going, yes, oh, there's more on me, but he got all the I'll go and blow the Maria, keep calling on her, I'll be ready. I don't understand myself. Oh, there are I'll do the light on my power, I'll be, I'll do the light on. I have values. I'll be the one together, ocean and more. Parsha is numbers and a series of first Miriam dies, Aaron dies, and these two deaths shock for the Israelites because this is part trifecta, the triumvirate, what do we call this? 3 people in charge, Moses, Miriam, and Aaron, stewarding the people through the desert. And when I look at these 2 big, they seem to represent slightly different processes that have faced. So my questions, get ready to say things, that I want to ask us, what is the difference between grieving and complaining? Now let me give a little background while you think about it. Grieving and complaining. There's no right or wrong answer to this question. There's no one answer. But I want to try to flesh out the difference because sometimes, ostensibly, they can look the same. For here, Moses died and Miriam, but not at the moment. Aaron died and Miriam died. They can both be stating things that have gone awry in your life. They both involve some sense of maybe wishing that life were other. Let's hear some ideas. What might be a difference, either internal, external, behavior, and mindset between grieving and complaining?
I think grieving is kind of like more of an expression of something from internal, like coming out of you, like dealing with like large, overwhelming emotions and getting them out. Whereas complaining is kind of like might have triggered an internal emotion, but it's something external that you're like, hey, that over there is what I'm talking about. Versus like that in here is what I'm talking about.
Okay, interesting. I agree there that I'm going to try to pull out. One, I think you said overwhelming. So maybe there's something about grieving versus complaining that the feeling you're feeling, is maybe so big. And then when I hear it, it's something internal, grief, versus something over there, maybe a sense of blame. Complaining involves like, that's the problem. Whereas grief might be some recognition in some of the problems in mind.
Maybe even adding on to that, it's like, this is something that is mine, that I'm grieving, versus like, I'm complaining about something separate from me that I just don't like or whatever.
Great. Okay, so and then I'll go this way now. So there might be something in there, and give me 3, so it's we're cheating here. There might be something about like what do I have control over? Which is interesting because you could say it both ways. Grief is something you don't have control over, or maybe you could say it that way. Like, okay, the grief is mine. The complaining, that's y'all. That's the problem. Okay, how so?
You accept.
I love that. Okay, so yeah, there is a difference in acceptance. So a complaint, you kind of want to fight reality. You're going to complain about what is. You maybe think you can change it with your complaint, or actually sort of a productive complaint. Most people don't even try to change something they're complaining about. They just want to gripe about it. But maybe there certainly is a difference in acceptance. Grief might involve some sort of sense of this is what it is, and what is left for me is to have a way to load that or process the consequences. So I can.
Well, I'm just going to say that to me it's a control thing. You really don't. You can't control grief. You can control it.
Interesting. Control the expression.
Complaining is something that you proactively do, but grief is something that comes over.
Have you ever met a chronic complainer? Not me, obviously. Don't say me. Yes. They can learn. I'm being exactly because I think that's a good point. So I thought you meant can you control the thing you're complaining about? No. But what you're saying is to some extent a complaint is a choice. You're choosing to be a griper. But grief, happens to everyone, and unfortunately in this world it's outside of our control.
So you grieve over your death. So death is a hard thing to accept. But you can complain about something that really isn't such a big deal. You just don't like it.
That's really interesting. So maybe this is why this brand. Obviously, the 2 examples I'm about to bring are deaths. But when I was in biblical school, we had a very brief intro to counseling. They teach you all kinds of things. We read a lot of college. But anyway, one of the things that our teacher brought up was this idea of frozen grief. So it's grief about something that perhaps the community or even the griever don't acknowledge to be worthy of grief. Maybe you lost a relationship with someone, but it was sort of an informal relationship, and so society doesn't see that as a big grief. Or maybe you moved away, and so
the loved ones having passed away, but your relationship has really suffered a blow. These kinds of grief that aren't quite death, but that maybe also give us a feeling of grief that are sort of below the threshold of death. And there is a value in sort of acknowledging that it's not saying you're not, but this is just fun for me. Acknowledging that there is a value in grieving that, lest it become this thing they call frozen grief, which is a grief that you sort of repress because it's not given an outlet.
Well, grief becomes for the loss.
Yeah.
Whereas you complain about anything, you complain great. Loss.
That's true. Complaining can be very tricky. So the Israelites are notorious for complaining. That's sort of what they don't do that. What are you talking about? Don't complain about it. They do it a lot. So if they're complaining all the time, they would say our loss was our home. We lost Egypt. Now their vision of Egypt is like very rose-colored glasses in the past. They think that it was great. They had free pomegranates everywhere. They were also slaves. But you could maybe say, I'm grieving something else. But I love it. So there's an idea of maybe a lesser thing at stake. Something that you could easily control yourself not to do if you were maybe more self-aware or more patient. There's an idea that it is maybe an overwhelming emotion or something that you lost. I actually think, I love that we have ideas for how it's clear. I think it's often very unclear internally what's happening, whether we're complaining or grieving. Often people who are complaining are not aware that they are complaining. They think they are processing a sort of frustration or grief. But let's look at these two deaths. Now, if you ask a different rabbi or ask this rabbi at a different time, I might not read them this way, but for tonight, this is what struck me. Miriam's death versus Aaron's death. So Miriam dies first, and then Aaron dies later in the parsha. And I'm going to just glom on the labels I think are fit here. I think the first death results in Israelite complaining, and the second death results in Israelite grief, even people. Now, of course, as always, if you're voting for me, I'm delighted for you to say that I'm wrong and say the opposite, but you need to give me a reason. Okay. Here is the text for Miriam's death. The Israelites arrived in a body at the wilderness of Tzim on the first new moon, and the people stayed at Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. The community was without water, and they joined against Moses and Aaron. The people quarreled with Moses, saying, if only we had perished when our brothers perished at the instance of the Lord. Why have you brought the Lord's congregation into the wilderness for us and our beasts to die there? Why did you make us leave Egypt to bring us to this wretched place, a place with no grain or figs or vines or pomegranates? There is not even water to drink. It might not even seem ostensibly like you're fighting about Miriam's death, but this is what precipitates it. We get this one sentence: Miriam died there and was buried there, and then the people are complaining. So when we see this, now we said grief maybe has to do with something overwhelming about death or something that happens to you. But here they are. They love Miriam. She was the one who led all the song as they left Egypt and crossed through the sea, and we get this sort of vicious complaint. So, any ideas what do you think is happening? Yes. So there may have been this thing they lost when they lost Miriam, that Miriam was able to find a well wherever she went. So wherever they camped, she's either able to turn bitter water sweet, although most of them stick. Some kind of acid-based situation, I'm not sure. But she was often, the rabbis say, actually, I think to understand this part of the Torah, the source of water. All right, so we could see something like this happening in your own lives. Maybe you have a genuine grief, something that's outside of your control. Maybe you have lost someone, God forbid, or something terrible has happened, but you externalize it as a complaint. So rather than grieving Miriam, which is not mentioned in Torah, maybe this sense of grief comes out as a, which I think we can see that in the Torah that looks embarrassing to the children of Israel, but it's actually far more typical, I say as a rabbi, than you might imagine. That someone feeling grief over something very large finds a complaint about something smaller that is within their control. All right, now let's read.
So I would argue that they're just brought to the surface complaints that they've been having ever since they left Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a new complaint. They just said, okay, now it just brought to the front
Yeah.
Circumstances that they've been unhappy with for a prime number of years from wandering around the death.
Right. So you could, so it's actually a midrash that Miriam provides the will, which is trying to explain what happened here. But I can take your point that nothing happened here. People would complain this whole time about not being Asian. This is just another example of complaint. Maybe it was a moment of weakness where they felt like they could complain again. But why is it bubbling up now? It bubbled up forever.
No, it just, this event precipitated it. It just, she obviously gave them some comfort. And now they've lost that. Maybe the complaining goes away if somebody comes in, calm down, we're gonna be okay. We just, they feel like things are not so bad. Now that influence has gone away. But now that's rubbish.
All right, so maybe they lost their soother. The Israelites aren't very good at self-soothing. They lost their soother. That's possible. Okay.
I would argue that complaints can be selfish-based, whereas grief can be more based. I want this, I want that. This will go right. Give me more hours. But when people grieve, though, it's usually the artist with loss of losses. But I one time listened to a relevant who said that the reason why we grieve is because when someone dies, the loss of something that could be for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
So that's why we grieve. So I would put the loss of connection it's heavy. But I hear complaints like they're wrong.
Right.
Like they were.
Yeah. Lots of people complain.
Like
some.
I mean, just staff one time. Oh.
Yeah. So
staff.
sometimes we grieve like an alternate future we thought we might have, which is not quite a death, but sometimes, death might be grieving also an alternate future that you would have had with that person. But we can grieve a life path not taken or a life path taken from us. We can also complain about those. So let me quickly read Aaron's, and then I'll try to tie this thing together. Aaron's death. Moses stripped Aaron of his vestments and put them on his son Eleazar, and Aaron died there on the summit of the mountain. When Moses and Eleazar came down from the mountain, the whole community knew that Aaron had breathed his last. All the house of Israel bewailed Aaron for 3 days. Okay, so there you have loss of a beloved person, grief. That seems pretty straightforward. With Miriam, you had loss of a beloved person, a lot of grief. Now, maybe because she was the balm, or maybe because that was the approximate, immediate impact of her death. Maybe they're sad, but they're also thirsty. So I run or be about to run a surprising number of shivas this week, and it is hard, especially in the South, where people are very genteel and welcoming, to try to remind mourners that they don't need to provide an enormous spread of food to people who are coming to comfort them. But maybe they're worried that you're going to get a little post-Miriam like Rumble. People are going to come to console you and say, "Where's the water? Where's the snacks?" So I don't know what's happening here in the South, but that is a big thing we can talk about. You don't need to feed everyone a shiva, but so that might be maybe what's happening. But here's the question I want us to wrestle with, and maybe you've thought about this your whole life, you've never thought it before. If you think it's not relevant to you, probably all more important things. Okay. Some people think they are grieving. They are just having an emotional overwhelmed reaction to something upsetting, something outside of their control, but really they are complaining. They might feel that this is a justified feeling. They're not aware that it's in their control. They're not aware that it's outside of them. So what are some ways you might see if you're doing this? Okay, one of them, I wrote about this in my blog. The link is broken, so if you go to my blog, you find it. But it came out in an email. I think one thing that the people of Israel do here is something I'm going to call, and I made this up, so don't Google it, complaint stacking. So as opposed to feeling a grief about something, there's this like snowball of all the things they ever thought went wrong in their life, and it's this and this and this and this. And so I think if you find yourself complaining in a way where one complaint pulls another one, that might not be a grief of something big and a loss, but an irritation with what is outside of your control. So maybe if the complaints stack one on top of another, it's indication that it's not grief but complaint. Or I came up over here, the idea that the grief isn't reflective on you and your own emotional experience, but may involve some sort of external blame. So if your grief is, my God, I'm so angry, you did that, you stole from me, you ruined my life, you took someone from me, seems less like grief and more like. But then now let's look at the flip side. I think sometimes we see people complaining. This one is hard because it's annoying when people complain. But we see people complaining, and really what they are doing is some sort of misshapen, misdirected grief. Okay, so when can this be happening? Maybe when people have other needs, like they're thirsty, that are appearing, or people who are not secure enough in where they are to really feel the overwhelming feeling, but they do feel like they can get a little bit more control over the situation with a good complaint. But when you meet someone who is coming out with maybe a vociferous negativity or a big feeling, sometimes it can be very helpful when you meet a complainer to ask, what is the grief that is happening for this person, and in what way can I support them through that? And with the case of Miriam, the rabbis do say that Miriam's death was a loss of honor. And so in this way, maybe what's happening in the death that seems a little bit callous is that their complaint is displaced grief. They have lost this woman who has cared for them. Miriam is seen like a mother of the people of Israel. She has nourished them and she has provided for them. But as they wander through the desert, they don't have the place of mind or the stability or the vulnerability to grieve her. And so maybe it comes out. Yeah. Yes, complaining is a much easier reach than grief. Sometimes grief is a big, scary step. But a complaint gives you a little feeling of safety and we will continue through after our candle lighting. We'll meet again on page 27. It'll come through. It's not just a service chemical, that's yeah. Right. That was kind of Amen. Page 27. Need more chili on the Shabbat. Oh, Behold my living mother, you mystery, my dear Romana, I have heaven to hell, the bit of a Kodesh, I'm not in the Lord, and Yami. Before you're saying, your Mordecai on page 30, Remember those whose yard site prefers the day in our community, with the day ending at sunset. Michael Bressler, Audrey Nathan, Rita, Lucy, Siegel, and Kobe Tenenbaum. And yard sites that begin tonight go to the next Shabbat. Does anyone in the room have one that you'd like to name? Yeah, for the week. Tonight. Yeah. Farrell, Sol Cohen, Judy Cole, Leon Garfinkel, William Minister, Hannah Schneider, Hyman, Saul Brett, Elaine Cohen Kugel, Seymour Fendel, Elliot Hendricks, Lester Gross, Saul Cohen, Eva Exelberg, David Domsky, Annie Friedman, Betty Eisenberg, Tilly Jacobson, Deborah Paul, Reba Barron, Betty Berger, Paul Schlesinger, Stan Sukan, Jamie Tennyson, Brittany Wilkins, Itzhak Permanova, and Emily Baker. Please rise as you're able, order time to be up there. Yikadal, Yishkadash, today, Rabba, Delma, Tibra, Kirute, Yamdi, Kute, Ayakon, Yomakon, Ayako, Israel, Balgala, Biswan, Hurry, Hebrew, Rohane, Ishte, Rabba, Barak, Balgala, Yibara, Yishaba, Yibara, Yishama, Yisnase, Yisadar, Yisolan, Yisolal, Shmi, Bishar, Ayla, Nicole, Yerkata, Shirata, Yishata, Mekwanta, Miranda, Alma, Incorporated, in H. Rama, Rama, Mishana, Israel, Hebrew, A. Jose, Shalom, Yibara, we are say Shalom, Alima, Holy Israel, Hebrew. Page 39A. 39A. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu. Adonai Baruch Me'alam V'Aretz. You see it, correct? Mario Megillah, Matilda Megillah, Adonai Tzvah Shema. I can't believe it. Baruch Adonai. Amari Rabbi, Allah Mitzvah. Barakah Tziril Olamim, Baruch Adonai Eloheinu Yisrael. 41. Eloheinu Yisrael,
ושמוע תקנו בהם, לחיים ולשלום, מעתה ועד עולם. פרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, ברוך אתה אדוני, אחורי סוכת שלום עלינו, ועל כל עמו ישראל, ועל ירושלים. Please rise if you're able, page 46. Then shall rule and Israel. And you lay the Israel, all keep their law, all keep their law. Keep their law. You say you are someone, We continue with individual prayer. Yamida found on page 47 to 50.
Meet on page 50.
Vayevu Hashem ha'Yisrael, v'chol tzevah, v'yipal v'yom hashvi, v'lachto asher asa, v'yishpot v'yom hashvi, v'kol melachto asher asa, v'yiparet Elokim v'yom hashvi, v'yikal Hashem shoto, v'yirov Shabbat v'kol melachto asher bara Elokim sh'asu. So three. Page 56.
Services at 9 tomorrow, at normal time, and then we have midnight at 6 with shell shows. Some announcements. Mazel tov to Stacy and David Fisher on the marriage of their son Zachary to Ariana Sidoti this weekend. Also mazel tov to Kim and Richard Coleman on the marriage of their son Jeremy to Adele Pinto this weekend. Also mazel tov to David Kildar on the marriage of his daughter Hannah to Nick Christensen last weekend. And thank you, Nick and Stacy Bianco, for okay, great sadness that we note the passing of Michael Adam Craig, son of Francie Gilbert Craig, Marty Sipton, and brother of Hannah Craig. Also the passing of Arthur Glass, father of Robin Feldman, Chuck Elberg, grandfather of Samuel and H. Feldman, and also the passing of Scott Dipperson, brother of Andrea, Jeff Gold, uncle of Jordan Ariel, and Jeremy Gold, and also to the passing of Carol Andrea's 80s mother, Amy Fraser's mother, Waldman. Please note the following. We are offering a community read over the summer of Rabbi Alan Lu's book, This is Real, and You Are Completely Unprepared. The first sessions are on Saturday, July 26th at 6:30, and Thursday, July 31st at 10:30 for a full schedule of learning. Check out the adult education website. My next copy and commentary is Saturday, July 19th. So that's Saturday after Saturday. Young families are invited to our second session, possibly Park at Linwood Splash Pad, Sunday, July. We'll continue with Shalom Alechem, and then we will eat some bread. If you'd like the words for Shalom Alechem, make on page 70. Shalom Alechem. Patalayani nakalan makot sila kani